Alright, you may be right, you may be wrong. Alright, brothers and sisters, thank you for joining me today. We are going to look at everyone's favorite topic, the calendar, right? 364 days, 365 days. Do we follow the sun? Do we follow the moon? I'm not going to get too deep into it, but we are going to examine this idea, this 364 and 365. And I have examined many calendars over the years, and just have considered the equilux and the equinox and all of these different type ways of calculating. And if you go into time and date, you can look at the equilux. If you go to Australia, their equilux, equal night and day is almost a week off in comparison to Jerusalem. So that's why I have some issues with the equilux theory, and they did not have that type of equipment to measure back in the day. But today we're going to examine the oath, the signs that were given to us, the Aleph, Wa, Tav, right? So when reading scripture, it's going to help us to have a macro and a micro perspective regarding the temple, the heavenly tabernacle. So the heavenly tabernacle above the heavens with all the menorah, the lights that light up that temple, compare that to the earthly temple tabernacle, compare that to the human tabernacle temple. So when you get that understanding and you read the scriptures, a lot of stuff starts to fit, and you can see a lot of things that Yahuwah has provided for us in his word. And we can understand the sun to be kind of like a glowing arc, right? It's protected by flaming swords, stars, right? So, and it's where the word is. It's Eden. It's paradise. It's at the heart of the matter. It's in the center. And so in this video, I want to resolve this 364, 365 day calendar issue, and it's really not as complicated once we understand how time is tracked and how they did things back in the ancients. And so the word spring itself, it's connected actually to the word ear, like that of Abib, and the beginning of spring. We understand that a new year begins at the vernal equinox, and I'm going to show that here in this video. So, like I said, I've considered the equal light, equal dark concept, but I think it falls apart. And so Enoch even says equal parts day, equal parts night. So Enoch uses the term parts. He doesn't say hours or anything like that. So, that's the debate, I guess, whether it's light or just sections of a day. But if you read the book of Enoch, he does 18 parts, which would equate to 1 hour and 20 minutes, or 80 minutes per hour, or 60 minutes. So if you do the math on that, that's how, if you're saying that the parts equal hours, that's where you would land. So, but I believe that the heavens are a huge clock circling above us, above our heads, and they are the sun, the moon, they're faithful witnesses. And we need to understand that there's a clock above us, and Yahuwah put these ordinances in place on day 4, right? So everything was created, and then day 4 he gave them the instructions on what to do when. So and Uriel's over those, and you'll be excited to see the video I got coming out about Uriel. But don't get too alarmed with these symbols here. I know sometimes we have kind of an allergic reaction when people of other groups do certain things a certain way, and then they reject it, and I think that can be sometimes a bit of a fallacious reaction. Just because somebody's doing something a certain way doesn't mean it's necessarily evil, or it really comes down to who they're paying homage to. Because people pray, so should we not pray just because this group over here prays or something like that? So, but bear with me, stick with me on this, and we'll get to what a lot of these symbols that we've probably considered pagan are actually somewhat relative within Scripture. So, of course, like I've said before, there. So, all right, let's see what we got here. So, okay, so what do we have here? Isaiah 38, 7 through 8. So this is kind of tying into the 10 degrees that we just discussed. The Hezekiah, it says, and this sign to you, this is the sign to you from Yahweh, that Yahweh does this word which he has spoken. See, I am bringing the shadow of the sundial, which has gone down with the sun on the sundial of Ahaz, 10 degrees backward. And the sun returned 10 degrees on the dial by which it had gone down. So the sign is the Aleph U Tav. That connects the Aleph to the Tav, right? And so the word sun is Shemesh. That's Sheen, Mem, Sheen. So you kind of have like a Mem as the waters. The Sheen is the two teeth, the dividers, the fire. And then the word dial is Ma'alah, which has gone down. So it's saying that it has descended down, Ma'alah, so Mem, waters, and then Allah, that is ascent. So just like the Muslims say Allah Akbar, that's the ascended one, the high and lofty one is what they're saying. And so he's saying that the stairs, the steps, the degrees, it returns 10 Ma'alah within the, I guess you could say, the azimuth scale, 10 steps backwards. So think about steps, degrees. Think about steps. What they do, you ascend on a step, you go up. And so Psalms, I believe it starts in Psalm 120, 121, something like that, 120 to 134. It's 15 degrees. It's called the Psalms of Ascents, Song of Ascents. And so in a full circle, a 360 degree circle, we have a 24-hour period. And that would equate to 15 degrees per hour. If you divide a 360 degree circle up by 24, you get 15 degrees. It just so happens there are 15 Psalms written specifically called the Psalms of Ascent. And then Amos 9:6, it says that Yahuwah, he builds his Ma'alah in the heavens, right? So the stairway to heaven, just like Solomon's temple, he built 3 levels. He built a staircase that takes you to the 3rd story, right? So the Bible's a story. The word midrash in Hebrew is a story. So he goes up to the 3rd story, the 3rd level, the 3rd heaven, if you will. And look at Isaiah 40, verses 3 through 4. It says, the voice of one crying in the wilderness, Midbar. So I think a lot of us are, might connect this to John the Baptist preparing the way for the Messiah. He says, prepare the way, make straight, right? So he's making straight the shadow in the desert of the highway, the Imshalah. Same connection to Ma'alah. For our Elohim, and let the valley be raised, and every mountain and hill be made low, and the steep ground shall be made level. And then Exodus 33:21, Yahweh says, talking to Moshe, behold, there's a place where you shall stand on the rock, and while my glory, think of glory as kind of like the sun, it's really bright, passes by a bar, goes over the bar, I will put you in a cleft in the rock and will cover you with my palm, with my hand, until I have passed by. Then I will take away my hand, my kaf, and you shall see my back, my achur, but my face you shall not see. So the word passes by is the word abar. From Hebrew we get abarim, spelled the same exactly, except for Hebrew has the yod on the end of it, and then the wilderness is midbar. So it's kind of like you're passing the bar in law school to fulfill the law when we are keeping the straight and narrow path. And the word Pesach itself actually means pei is like a mouth, open up. Samek is like thorns, and then the ket is kind of like a fence, a perimeter. So it's the Pesach, the crown of thorns that goes on the head. Okay, so what are we looking at here? Isaiah 11:12, it says, "And he shall set up an ensign," or a standard. Could be translated standard, an ensign, a sign, a flag, a marker, "for the nations, and shall assemble the outcast of Yashrael, and gather together the dispersed of Yehudah from the four corners," or the four quarters, or four wings. And so when you have a cross like that, you have four quarters. So four quarters of the earth. There's a lot of language within. If you really want to know what the earth looks like, what shape it is, look at temple language. Look at the tabernacle to see the curtains, the fabric of space. Look at the basin, the laver, right? We are in a lavatory. That's where that word comes from. And so it talks about the molten glass, the sea of glass, so that language is all in there to help us see Yahuwah's creation. And so this seal right here, what you're looking at on the left of the screen, is called the Hezekiah seal. And so it looks like a sun kind of with wings, right? And it has three little legs. There's actually four, but like the four corners. And so this sun with wings, I think, like from our Zoroastrian Ahura Mazda, so that symbol, that item, we've seen that, within other cultures and religions. But it says in Psalm 104:3, 1 through 3, that Yahuwah clothes himself with the sun, and he rides his chariots of fire and walks on the wings of the wind. And so this is a visual mind picture of representing Yahuwah and the sun and being on the wings and the four quarters, the wings of the wind. And so this is kind of the poetic language that they used back in the day. And we also notice on the right of the wing there you have an ankh. So that's an ankh cross, essentially. And probably recognize that from Egypt, certain religions with Christianity. So the cross, I'm aware of the argument about the stake versus the cross, and I don't get lost in that, but the cross is it's a symbol throughout antiquity, and it's meant to express crossing over, like crossing the bar, crossing a river out of the waters of Mitzrayim, out of Egypt. Noah coming out of the flood, out of the waters, kind of like baptism when you cross from the waters, coming out into the spirit, into the air. So Abraham, he becomes a Hebrew, right? He crosses over out of Babylon, crossing over from death to life on the cross. The Son, S-U-N, or the S-O-N on a cross. So, which the Son can be an analogous for the Sun, S-U-N. So, they come from the same word. If you look it up Germanically, Sonne, I think it is, son and son are the same thing. So, an ankh cross also looks like a tet, or possibly even a kuf. So if there's different similar implications there, and this is going to make sense in a second. But if you look at the Canaanite tet, that's what it looks. That's like an ancient, almost kind of like a symbolizing a circle with a line and a cross. The Hebrew tet is a circle with an X in it, like the bread basket. And then the Hebrew kuf, the Q, synonymous with the English Q, that looks kind of like the paleo, like a sun coming over the horizon, or a circle with a line in it. And so if you think of parallel, two lines, right, that run together, kind of like the horizon, that which is above and that which is below, that is pair of L's. It could be a pair of L's, right, left and right. So that's the kind of the spiritual versus the natural, the carnal. That's kind of the diabolical challenge we all face here on Earth. So I think kind of like you could think of all this Q talk, maybe that's the simulation winking at us at this time going on. But pretty interesting to see. But I think it's like the Hebrew tet is the bread basket. So if you saw my video on the palm sign, it shall be a sign on your hand. Go watch that video. I'm not here promoting, palm reading and future telling here on this channel. So if you want to know the future, read the scriptures. That's what I say. But this gives Palm Sunday a whole new perspective. We see that the seed, the ayin, looks like an eye. There's like a seed in the middle. So he's the pupil of his eye. So once this ayin is traveling on the ecliptic, it reaches the equator, and essentially it forms a tet. So that looks like the bread basket, right? So when the ayin travels and it crosses the equator, it hits the mark right over the top. And so the Hebrew word for mark is Zakar. And Zakar, that's tsade, kaf, resh. So it's kind of like the righteous hand leads the head, it leads the body. Zakar means to mark or to remember. And it's connected to marking the man. So we were told that Yahuwah marked Noah. So he remembered Noah. He zakared him. He marked him. He was a marked man. It says in Romans that Yahuwah declared Yahusha to be a son when he raised him from the dead. So the word declared means to be marked. Yahusha was a marked man. Yahusha is the marked man. So the X marks the spot, right? That's where the treasure is. That's where it's located. The X is what makes the man. And so, like, think of conception. The noon enters into the womb, into the bread basket. There's a bun in the oven, right? So that's the point of conception. So if you haven't had a chance, go watch my videos on the birth of the Messiah. So this is during this time of Abib that the seed is young and tender during Abib, right? I show that in the series about the Pesach and stuff. And so during this time, cultures will make hot cake buns with raisins called mandrakes. So biblically, the context that they use these raisin cakes for the purpose of fertility. Even we see here in 1 Chronicles 16:13 that David would told his people to go eat some of these cakes of raisins, these mandrakes, these cakes for fertility purposes. And so, of course, the world twists it and they pay homage to Ishtar and the fertility goddesses, the mother god worship, all this stuff. And so that's why you see the bunny rabbit iconography at this time of year. So, but this word middle is the word, it says that they brought the ark, kind of like the sun, they brought it into the middle of the tent. So the ark always goes in the middle of the holiest of holies. So that's where the word is, the commandments is. And this word this word middle is tavek. Kind of makes me think of it like a Tyvek suit, but it's tav, and it looks like an X in Paleo Hebrew. So it's the vav, the ua, the connector, and the kaf. So it's like the palm of the hand. The X is in the middle. The ark and the commandments are in the middle. So tavek is the same word that's used in Genesis 1:26 when Yah says, "Let there be a firmament in the middle of the waters." So the word firmament is rakia, resh, kuf, yod, ayin. So the resh is that head, that leader, and the kuf is symbolizing circling back to the yod, to the hand, in the ayin. So he separates the yom, the day, from the night, and night means liel, which is the twisting. And so we are trying to get stuff straightened here with Yahuwah's word. All right, so we're making a case for the equinox. So some more stuff to look at. Zephaniah chapter 1 verses 7, it says, "Be silent, hasha, hasa, hush, hush, be silent before Yahweh, for the days of Yahweh is near. Yahuwah has prepared a sacrifice," kind of like a Pesach offering, "and consecrated his guest. And on the day of Yahuwah's sacrifice, I will punish the officials and the king's sons and all who array themselves in foreign attire. And that day I will punish everyone who leaps over the threshold, and those who fill their master's house with violence. That's the word Hamas, like Hamas, right? Violence and fraud. And that day, declares Yahweh, a cry will be heard from the fish gate, from the dag. So the sun, I showed you in the other video, daylight savings, that the sun leaves Pisces and enters into Aries. A wail from the second quarter, a loud crash from the hills. So we see this talking about the threshold in Luke 3:17. His winnowing fork is in his hand, and he shall thoroughly cleanse his threshing floor and gather the wheat into his storehouse, but the chaff he shall burn with unquenchable fire, just like the sun, right? So that word silence, kind of like hush. There's a silence in heaven, right when the seventh seal is broken. When everything stands still, it's quiet, everything is in balance. After that, what happens? The wrath is poured out, the heat, summertime, things get hot, and plants will wilt and fade, and so mankind is under this wrath, if you will, and then the thunderbolts and the lightning. So this word near in Hebrew is kharab, and so the Q here symbolizing the rising out of the sun, or like a horizon, and the point of crossover, so a point of turning, a tav kuf, like takufa. So if we remove the cube, then we're left with Rab, and so that means great. It's where we get the word rabbi from, our rabbi. Our rabbi is in heaven. He's the marked man. The threshold. So the threshold is when the sun enters into the temple and it lights up the interior at the equinox. It's exactly due east. So the temple was designed to face east, and then one point during the new year, the sun would shine directly into the temple, light it up on the inside. So the threshold. So this word threshold is miftan, and the root word for that is pathan. It's kind of like where we get python from. So remember in Acts that Paul had to deal with the woman who had a spirit of python. What was she doing? She was dividing oracles, what it says in the apostolic polyglot. So really actually what it's saying is it's divining Hebrew language for profit, kind of like the Kabbalist and their adoration for the orbs in which they do. So I've been accused actually of practicing Kabbalah by severing out the Paleo Hebrew, but there is a righteous divination and then there's an unrighteous divination, and people, it really boils down to, who are you attributing to? What is your motive? I have no motive other than to know the Father and understand His Word, and I'm not trying to make a profit off of anyone. So, but the spirit of Python kind of makes me think of Pythagoras. The world's sorcerers, they like to infect us with their poisonous doctrines regarding Yah's creation. The God of this world, the snake, he twists, he winds, he blinds, right? He blinds the world. So in Moshe's day, they took the snake on the pole that was used for healing, but it ended up becoming a relic, and then Hezekiah had to tear it down because people worshipped the snake on the pole. So we don't worship the snake on the pole. That Messiah, he draws on that event happening, saying he's like the snake on the pole. That's in the sense that he's lifted up, he's resurrected, he's raised up just like the snake was. Not that he is the snake, but that in that same like manner fashion, he would be raised up on a pole and sacrificed. And so we don't worship the sun because we know the source of the sun, and we don't worship the sun, the S-O-N, the S-U-N, or the S-O-N, because those are just manifestations of Yahuwah's creation and not the Creator Himself, because not even the heavens can contain Him. So, but if you remember in talking about here in this verse 10 where it says, they heard a cry from the fish gate. That word fish is dag. So if you remember the ark was put in the presence of Dagon, the fish god. And the fish god, what happened? He's deaf, he's dumb, he falls down, and he's silent before the ark. The ark was in the middle. So this in Zephaniah is talking about, be silent before Yahweh, for the day of Yahweh is near. So what day is near? Is this like the end of, is, if you look at the day of the Lord, if you will, throughout Scripture, it's used multiple times. So is he talking about the end of everything, or is he saying, this is the day that the Lord hath made? This is the day that Yahuwah has made, all of creation. Day zero, starting at the big goose egg. The path of the sun is straight, the path is narrow, and we are trying to rightly divide the word of truth. Rightly divide with the right angles, the word of truth. That word rightly divide in Greek, ortho tomeo, maybe it's omega, omicron, omega, I'm not sure, but orthomoteo, which is where we get orthodontist from, or orthography, straightening out the letters, the type of letters and stuff. So it's to straighten out the crookedness, the darkness, the twisting that has been given to us in the shadows and the keepings of the moons and all these things. We're straightening these paths. So let's look at an example here in Ezekiel. So it says in Ezekiel, he said to the man clothed in linen. This is also a lot of temple language. Look into Ezekiel, read Ezekiel. He said to the man clothed in linen, go in among the whirling wheels underneath the cherubim. Fill your hands with burning coals from between the cherubim, and scatter them over the city. And he went in before my eyes. Verse 18 in chapter 10. Then the glory of Yahweh went out from the threshold of the house and stood over the cherubim. 40 verse 6. Then he went into the gateway facing east, going up the steps, that's the Ma'alah, right? He's ascending up the waters, and measured the threshold. That's the Hebrew word saf. The threshold of the gate, 1 reed deep on the side rooms, 1 reed long, and 1 reed broad. So it's 1 by 1, essentially, making a perfect cross. If you have 1 by 2, or you get off, what do you get? You get a double cross. Kind of like if you look on the Oreo, it actually has 12 things around it, and it's a double cross. So we're kind of double crossed with these calendars they've given us. But this word saf is the Hebrew word that's used for lip or border, or like a rim on a bowl. It talks about in Genesis regarding the borders of the sons of Noah. He confused their lip, is what it actually says. So it could be physical borders, could be language as well tied in there, but he confused their lips. So he can confuse borders. I've got a great video coming up on that, on the borders that have been confused, physical borders, or language borders, or even spiritual borders, even borders up in the heavens. You know, the different chambers that Yahuwah has given to us. Even the heavenly borders that have been confused by zodiacs and, you know, the ways of the world. So in Genesis 3:24 it says, he drove out the man, and at the east of the Garden of Eden he placed the cherubim, which is spelled with a kaf, cherub, and a flaming sword, which is the word cherub. And he turned every way to guard the way of the tree of life. So the tree of life is in the middle. That's in the garden. That's in our hearts. That's in the Word, the Torah. It's in the ark. The mercy seat, seats above. It goes in the middle. And so this language is pointing to this macro theology and micro theology within the heavens and within our spiritual tabernacles itself. So the ark is where the commandments are, right? That's the 2 stones, like the tablets of the heart. We write it on our hearts. We write the Torah, the commandments, on our hearts, and we guard them like we are an arc protecting our rib cage. You got 6 ribs on each side. It's all biblical. It's all biblical. All right, so let's just talk a little bit. I don't want to get too much into this, but this I think is important to understand, like why, this flat globe, this and that. But did you know that I talked about this in my video a while back about math magicians and how our school systems and our systems of education and learning are deeply rooted in philosophy and magic. And if you haven't already, check out that video. Go take a look at that. But we see that math magicians use occult techniques like numerology and magic circles to influence the nations. So I looked up magic circles here in Sumer, Hermetic, Order of the Golden Ways, Wicca, all these types of Hellenist practices, Kabbalist. So traditionally, circles are believed by ritual magicians to form a protective barrier between themselves and what they summon. So one text known as the Heptameron says of the circle, but because of the greatest power is attributed to circles, for they are a certain fortress to defend the operator safe from the evil spirits. In the first place, we will treat concerning the composition of a circle. So basically, a magic circle is a circle of space marked out by practitioners of some branches of ritual magic, which they generally believe will contain energy and form a sacred space, or will provide them a form of magical protection, or both. So essentially, they're creating a safe space, right? So that the evil spirit won't get them. This picture here in the middle is a picture of the Solomonic Solomon circle with a triangle of conjuration in the east. So they conjure up the orbs. Leviticus 19:31 says, "Regard not them that have familiar spirits, nor seek after wizards," right? So that word ob, aleph, bet, kind of makes me think of orb, might not be connected, but they conjure up orbs, essentially the spheres that orbit around. It's what they call emanations within Kabbalah teachings, the Ein Sof, the 10 or 11 emanations. And so you can see where kind of this stuff is tied into a lot of stuff in our culture and even in Christianity and a lot of religions. So, all right, so let's resolve this calendar stuff here. So let's consider the sidereal. Consider the sidereal. So the word consider comes from coincitus, with the stars, or getting conned, right? But sidereal is the Latin word sidereus, which means star, with respect to distant stars, the constellations or stars, not the sun or the planets. So a sidereal day begins and ends with the passage of the vernal equinox over the meridian and is about 4 minutes shorter than the solar day, measured by the passage of the sun over the meridian. And so we know that a circle, 360 degrees, if I divide that by 24 hours, I get 15 degrees per hour. But it doesn't work like that. The sun, or what they tell us now, if you think about Earth spinning in a 360 degree circle every day, if the sun's here, 6 months later, you're going to be facing out into space. And so what they do is they add a degree to our 365-day calendar, and the actual sidereal day is 23 hours and 56 minutes long. So it's 4 minutes short. So we reckon time using a 24-hour circular clock, and it goes around twice, 2 intervals, double crosses, right? The 12. This is called a solar day or a synodic day. So however, in reality, it's actually 361 degrees. And it has to be, because otherwise the globe model would fall apart, because the whole model pays homage to the sun being at the center of the universe, the universe, the one world order. But an actual 360-degree full circle day, a sidereal day, is 23 hours and 56 minutes long. So you have 365 sun-ups and down periods within a 364 24-hour period. So just looking at this, here's just a visual representation. Just thinking of how, looking down at this image here, the rotation of the Earth, 360 degrees, it's going to put you back out looking at the sun. You do a full circle at 12 o'clock noon, you'd be looking out in space. So to remedy that, they add a degree. So 364 days is a sidereal day and is only 23 hours and 56 minutes. So 4 minutes short, multiply that up, you get your extra day, 24.33 hours. That's our 365 solar day. And the word synodic, the word synode by definition is an assembly of the clergy and sometimes also the laity in a diocese or other division of a particular church. Synodic means conjunction. So the church conjoins their faith to this doctrines of spheres. If the Earth spun 360 degrees each day, 6 months later, we'd be looking out into space at 12 o'clock. But like I said, they remedied this calculation, adding this degree to keep the spinning globe model going. So, starstruck. The word starstruck. Let's get serious. The word starstruck, that phrase starstruck, comes from the star Sirius. And we see this here, the Egyptian personification of Sirius, called the Sopdet. She's holding the Ankh with the star above her head. And so Sirius is the brightest star seen from Earth, and Sirius is recorded in some of the earliest astronomical records. Its displacement from the ecliptic causes its heliacal rising to be remarkably regular compared to the other stars, with a period of almost 36.25 days holding to it constant relative to the solar year. So interesting. I'm not going to dive into that, but go look her up, look into Sirius, something there. I'm not going to harp in on that, but I think it ties into the Egyptian calendar. It says, during the early period of Egyptian civilization, the heliacal rising of the brightest star preceded the usual annual flooding of the Nile. It was therefore apparently used for the solar civil calendar, which largely superseded the original lunar calendar in the 3rd millennium BC. The ancient Egyptian calendar is a civil calendar, and it was a solar calendar with 365-day year. So that's what we're on, is a civil. We need to be civilized. They want us to be civilized, right? So follow their calendar. The year consisted of 3 seasons of 120 days, so that's a 360-degree circle, plus an intercalary month of 5 epagomenal days, which is intercalculation and timekeeping. Insertion, it's a leap day and the weekday, so people leaping over the threshold. So the Egyptian calendar is a civil calendar. They want us to be civilized and follow their gods. It's a solar calendar, 365 days. So in short, we kind of see some similarities where the construction of Enoch. But how does 364 equal 365? Beloved, do not be deceived. Every good and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, in whom there is no variation or shadow due to change. So there's no twisting of the shadow. There's no bending, no arc. Everything is straight on the day of Yahweh. So let's think about time itself. When a day starts, basically you're starting at 0, right? So here's a good example in Luke 3:23. It says, Yahushua began to be about 30 years of age. So that means he was in his 29th year, about to be 30. So when you think about this, when a human person is born, coming out of the matrix, right, out of the womb, they're in darkness in the womb. And as soon as they pass through the matrix, they enter the earthly realm, the light hits. That's when we start the clock. That's when day begins. Just like at the creation, as soon as we see light, it becomes day one. There was the evening, and then there was a morning, and that was day one. And then after the morning starts day two. So there's a count, there's a sequence. And so day one of your life, when you are born, you are in your first year still, but you're not quite 1 year old. So when you get to the 11th month or so, you are about 1 year old. And when you turn one, you're now in your second year. Even though you're one, you're in your second year. So your age plus one is the year that you are currently in your life. So if you're 44 years old, add one to that, you're now starting your 45th year of life. Well, let's take that consideration and apply it to the calendar. So concerning the calendar, we have name, number, and count. So at the beginning of creation, we have day 0. Right? So day 0, it's not necessarily considered a day in the naming convention, as it's X'd out. It's 0. It doesn't, you don't start with that. So, but it is included in the count. If you follow the count including 0, the 364th day will be day 365, and day 0 will be the 365th day of the year. So take some time, pause the screen if you got to look at that, but seconds make minutes, make hours, make days. So just like birth, just like creation, there's that 0 to 1. Well, that is a day technically. It's day 1, but it's circling back, it's the 365th day. It's day 0, and so the calendar kind of resets in a sense, but the sequence is never broken. And so you go day 2, day 3, day 4, follow that all the way to 364. That's your 364th day, but it's day 365. And then your 365th day is day 0, which is one day 1, right? So take some time, take a look at that. But I think that's kind of resolves. I think 364 is 365. It's just the language. I think that Enoch uses a different language essentially to communicate, the calendar. So, but I think we're all on par just on how you're naming your days. So, in conclusion, we can see a lot of confusion with the calendar. So, in the New Jerusalem recorded in the book of Revelation, there is no sun and there is no moon. There's no temple. So I think maybe some of this stuff is a little bit less relevant. I think the important thing really is the commandments, what's on your heart. The first 2 commandments, the 2 tablets, you can't fulfill the first commandment of loving Yahweh if you don't fill the second commandment by loving your neighbor, because your friend, your family, your brother, because we are the manifestation of Yahuwah, of his creation, and how we treat one another regarding things that seem somewhat ambiguous can have a big impact on, our lives. And I think that could be part of the test. Maybe that's really why there's some ambiguity. I think, there's definitely people that are trying to understand these things, and we're trying to get back into sequence. But I think if we go to starting point, day 0 at the equinox, and then we start our count after that day of being day 1, that'll get us back. That'll get us things straight. So, we can argue over when the flood happened, or was it local or worldwide, or whether the ark had animals on it. Whether Jonah was swallowed by a fish or a whale, or whether he was dead or alive, or when the Messiah was born, killed on a cross or a stake, etc. Pick your battle. But maybe Yahuwah just wants us to love one another. So Maybe the midrash, the stories, are designed to teach us a more important lesson on interacting with one another. And like I said, I may be right, I may be wrong. Put some comments down. What do you think about this? If that makes sense. Like I said, I'm open for correction or whatever. So, but sure love you guys, and we'll see you on the next one. Shalom.